Hello, and thanks for joining us for Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar. Lead contamination can be found all throughout the U.S., everywhere from Flint, Michigan to Southern California. And this is a serious situation. Over the years, while there's been some outrage in some major American cities from both residents and the national news media because of this, Los Angeles and its own lead contamination crisis has been somewhat invisible, although not for the victims, the neighbors of East LA, who for years have been pleading with city, county, and state officials to finally dispose of the lead that has poisoned their backyards. The culprit in all of this, a now closed neighborhood battery recycling plant known as Exide.
We have been trying since we found out in 2013 about how we can get this clean, how bad is the problem. We didn't even know how bad things were. And it's taken us years, now over almost decade, and really things haven't been done the way they should be.
For over 10 years, neighbors like Terry Gonzalez Cano, living near the Exide Technologies battery recycling plant, about 5 miles south of downtown Los Angeles, have been battling with government leaders from the city, county, state, even the feds, to once and for all dispose of the massive amounts of lead and arsenic contamination that to this day have polluted their communities and poisoned their homes. For years, Terry and other residents say no one was listening. Many neighbors question whether anyone with the state of California is listening today.
Department of Toxic Substance Control did not want to test the soil. I feel that it was out of community pressure and us threatening to have our soil tested ourselves and go public with the results, forced them to finally test the soil, because they had told us in several public meetings they weren't going to test it because it's not protocol. They normally don't do that. But because of the levels of toxins in the air, it would only make sense that eventually they would fall to the ground, and we were correct. We had no idea how bad it was, but after operating for so long, negligently and criminally, none of the homes here are safe.
Exide is located in the city of Vernon, next to East LA and South LA, where there are some of the poorest neighborhoods in California. This disadvantaged community of Los Angeles borders the 15-acre recycling plant. The facility had been operating in this area for over 90 years, recycling anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 lead-acid car batteries and other types of batteries a day. And despite the fact that state of California regulators had this toxic battery plant on their radar for years and knew Exide was a primary lead polluter in the region, Exide somehow escaped the scrutiny and was still allowed to stay in business. That is until 2015, when in part, the state of California and their Department of Toxic Substances Control, after years of neglect, finally stepped in. DTSC finally began a massive cleanup of the contaminated soil. The lead pollution was so egregious, Exide was forced to close permanently. The company signed an agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office to shutter the business. The deal allowed Exide and its employees to avoid prosecution for years of what was ruled environmental crimes, crimes that included illegal storage, disposal, and shipment of hazardous waste. The company also agreed to pay about $50 million to help demolish and clean the plant and the surrounding communities. Scientists estimate this colossal project to rid the lead in a nearly 2-mile radius of the plant is still going to take years, costing hundreds of millions of dollars, and they say the environmental impact is overwhelming. The soil, groundwater, and air around the plant all tested high for toxic metals, with estimates of as many as 10,000 homes contaminated from the lead emissions. Lead is a neurotoxin that, when ingested, can cause serious physical and mental health problems. So what did Exide do knowing this? Take responsibility, clean the neighborhood, work with neighbors like any conscientious corporation should? No. The shamed battery plant filed for bankruptcy and ran away, leaving neighbors, people of color, mostly low-income Hispanics, to fend for themselves. Over the years, I repeatedly contacted Exide for comment. No one ever returned my emails or phone messages. The company is not talking. Terry Gonzalez Cano is talking, and as she explains, these days her battle with the state of California and DTSC is now a war, with neighbors fighting for their lives. Terry has lived in Boyle Heights near East LA next to Exide her entire life. Now she's a neighborhood activist fighting for environmental justice for her community. Terry has dedicated her life this past decade to speak on behalf of thousands of angry neighbors, many of whom are still irate, believing they are invisible and ignored, while their homes and backyards are still drenched in lead.
DTSC has let us down consistently. That's the only thing they've been consistent in, is letting us down. They were negligent in supervising the company. This should never have happened. Different violations, criminal violations, they never notified the public. It was when we pressured them for answers did we finally find out what was happening. They let it happen, and then they're never transparent with us. They don't tell us the truth. They tell us what they want us to hear, because we're constantly getting either misinformation, no information, or just plain, we know you're upset, but this is our decision. Basically, you have to live with it.
Terry believes this lead crisis, in part, is still here today because her neighborhood is not an affluent community of money and means. She says this disadvantaged minority community was simply unable to fight back over the years.
If this was any affluent community, this would have been cleaned up. People from Exide would have went to jail. People at the state agencies and the federal agency, EPA, that supervises DTSC, they would have been fired. But here we are, years later, people have lost their lives. That's the worst part of it. People have lost their lives due to their negligence and incompetence. And no one has been fired. No one has went to jail. And they get to do this all over again someplace else to another minority communities. All the communities affected by this Exide contamination are all minority communities. We're an environmental justice zone with the worst environmental catastrophe that we've had in this state ever. Some of experts that we've spoken to have said that it's way worse than that of Flint, Michigan. Yet no one even knows that we even have this problem. And they're in no hurry to fix it.
Today, the California Department of Toxic Substances Control says the state is well aware of the problems out here and is working with residents living near Exide to dispose of the lead. DTSC says the agency has been routinely sending teams of workers to clear out the lead-impacted soil. This is the largest residential project of its kind in California history. DTSC says they've cleaned hundreds of homes so far, exteriors, and even in some cases, the interiors of houses to clean out things like lead dust or fugitive dust or soil tracked into the home. The California Department of Toxic Substances says workers have taken many samples of soil from over 8,500 parcels to determine the extent of the contamination, and DTSC has put together an interactive map which details the lead contamination and identifies properties prioritized for cleanup. DTSC provided us their own video interviews they took of a few residents who DTSC says are appreciative of the help the state of California has been giving them.
They did their samples, they came back, they said we're going to be doing it in this day. I had another young lady come in and she explained everything to me.
Sí, todo está bien.
Yes, everything is fine. We were all happy. There really weren't any issues. All went well.
State representatives say they are now also working with the neighbors to help them better understand their individual sampling results, as well as the entire cleanup process and work schedule. Some residents are also offered temporary relocation during the soil excavation. Once the lead-contaminated soil is dug out, DTSC restores the landscaping of the respective homes. DTSC officials insist the state of California is committed to making these neighborhoods safe. The question is, are most of the residents in this toxic, polluted neighborhood convinced they are now safe?
Both my parents passed from illnesses and diseases caused by the contaminants in the ground. My brother is end-stage cancer. He's terminal. There's no chance or hope for recovery for him. I've had multiple health problems my whole life, from liver disease, and I live a very healthy lifestyle. My liver shot, I've had strokes, I've had, I have multiple tumors, I have tumors in different parts of my body. I can't ever remember a time where I wasn't sick. And now, being a single parent, I have a son who I might not even live to see graduate because of all of my health issues and concerns. And I have no one to take care of him. I know we're not going to get any help from the state. They've already said that public health isn't their concern or their responsibility. So DTSC has no intention of ever acknowledging or even helping the health affected individuals. We've had 19 people die of cancer or are suffering with cancer on one small city block. And that's not including the people who develop chronic illnesses and chronic problems because of that. All of our children have had medical issues, all of them. It's sad to say that most everybody's gone, so it breaks my heart to see that future generations of other people's families are going to suffer the same thing that my family did, and that's heartbreaking. So I'm sorry for getting emotional, but that's just so incredibly wrong for this to happen to anybody.